All right, so this is the edited level 3 shot, and I think this looks really, really good. Let's quickly compare this with our other levels. So we started off with level 1, we took these two shots. You can see with the phone, it wasn't looking good. Went on to a DSLR, but then of course we were getting so much noise. Just look at this and then compare it to this. Okay, so if I zoom in here, this is absolutely clean, even on the top here. Of course, this would have looked better if you just paid attention, got rid of some of the things here, maybe added some bit of bubbles. We'll do all that later. But overall, I think this is at least, if I was to give it to a person, I would have probably been able to give it without really worrying too much about it. So I think this is looking good. But the next level is the one where we start changing a lot of other things which we've not paid attention to, which has mainly got to do with the props, the surface, the background, and all these things. So for that, I'm going to see you in the next video. Bye for now. All right, so before we end this video, I just want to quickly compare the 35mm f1.8 lens that I used in this video and with a very popular lens for food photography, which is the 50mm f1.8. In fact, a lot of people might already have this lens because they usually buy it when they're buying their camera. So I just want to clarify some things about this, okay? First of all, don't be under any stress at all. If you have this, you don't need this. If you have this, you don't need this. It's perfectly fine as a beginner, whichever of these lenses you have. You don't have to have both, okay? But let me just clarify some of the things. So the main difference is going to come for the people who have a crop sensor camera. Okay, so these are cameras which are not full frame cameras, the pro cameras. Okay, so chances are if you have got a camera which was not too expensive, there's a good chance that that is a crop sensor or that's a crop sensor camera which will have something called as a crop factor, which I'm just going to explain to you what it exactly means. Okay, so here's the thing. Let's say you have one of those inexpensive cameras, and if you just want to be 100% sure whether it's a crop sensor camera, what you can do is just go to Google and type the model of the name or the model of your camera on Google, and you will come to know the information about it. If it says something like crop sensor DX, okay, then it's a crop sensor camera. Okay, you'll come to know through Google. You can even type, is your model name a crop sensor camera? Okay, you can type something like that also. So once you've determined whether it is, then this thing becomes important. So each crop sensor camera has something called as a crop factor. Again, you can go to Google and type in your camera name and just with that crop factor. So you'll come to know whether it's 1.5, whether it's 1.6, 1.4. Sometimes for different models, it can just be slightly different. I've just taken the average here, which is 1.5, okay? So now what happens is, once you've determined that yes, you have a crop sensor camera, once you've found out the crop factor, then what you have to do is we have to actually calculate the effective focal length when we're using a prime lens. So for example, if I'm using a prime lens which is 35mm, just like the one I was using, but I was actually using that on the Nikon D5300 in the video that you saw. Now Nikon D5300 is a crop sensor camera. Therefore, the actual focal length I'm using when I took that food shot was not 35mm. You have to multiply it by the crop factor to get the actual focal length at which that shot was clicked, which is, in this case, 52.5mm. Okay? So even though what you saw in that video, I was actually shooting it from the 35mm lens, it was actually like using a nifty 50, like a 50mm lens, because it's much more closer to that. It would have been 35 and only 35 if I was using a camera which is a full frame camera. So in a full frame or a professional camera, you don't have a crop sensor. Okay, so 35 means 35. Similarly, same thing goes for, so this is called as the effective focal length when you multiply this with the crop factor, okay? Similarly, if you're using a nifty 50 or the 50mm f1.8, very popular lens, the effective focal length is 75mm if you're using a crop sensor camera. Okay, now, so here's the thing. And this would be my suggestion. If you have a full frame camera, okay, like those pro cameras, the expensive cameras, then yes, it makes more sense to go for the nifty 50, the 50mm lens. Okay, that's because you're not multiplying anything, right? So you're still shooting it at 50, which will be wide enough on a full frame camera. Whereas if you have a crop sensor camera and you have this lens, you're actually shooting your food shots at 75mm, which is okay. So again, don't panic about this, okay? 75mm for food shots, it's okay. It's just that you'll just have to move slightly back. That is why for crop sensor cameras, I actually recommend people to go for the 35mm lens if it's possible for you. And let's say if you haven't purchased any of these, if your first decision to purchase, then go for this if you have a crop sensor camera, because even after you multiply this, this is still coming to 50. It'll still be wide enough like you saw in the shot that I took. Again, I should repeat, don't panic. Both are okay. If you're buying for the first time, you would know what to do. So I hope that clears things. From the next video onwards, let's move to level 4.